30 seconds. 20 seconds. 10 seconds.
Hi,
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Good morning again. This is Jonathan Small, host and producer of Face to Face. And Face to Face is one of two different programs that I have the pleasure of hosting and producing live every single week at AccessTV.org studio. Face to Face is a show that's designed to ask the guests the hard questions and give you, the viewers, the answers and information that you deserve to know. This morning on Face to Face, I have a historical civil rights activist slash human rights activist. He has had a personal involvement in many civil rights movements from the 50s and the 60s. He was a personal driver in the Washington, D.C. area of the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The guest this morning on Face to Face is no other than human rights activist Raymond Fauntroy. Good morning, Reverend Raymond Fauntroy. How are you doing?
I'm alive and well, Jonathan, and God bless you.
Okay, God bless you too. Reverend Fauntroy, could you let people know a little bit about yourself and background briefly before we get into our main topics of discussion?
Well, yes, I born, raised, and grew up in Washington, D.C. I came up through the civil rights movement around 19 years old. I met Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and it was like getting hooked. And I got hooked into the civil rights movement. I've been there ever since. Um, I've been on most of the campaigns and voter registration drives throughout the South, through the southern states, and of course in Washington, D.C. And I'm formerly the president of the Young Democrats in Washington, D.C. In 1972. Um, I've been the president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference in Miami, Florida for 21 years. I was over the SCLC during all of those turmoils, the invasions of what I called invasions of the Cubans, and then the Haitians, and now everybody else. And the complexion has changed. And as I said, I've always said, we changed the complexion, but we haven't changed the condition that our people are facing in this country. So that has all led me to come to the conclusion that this is a human rights struggle, and that this is a spiritual warfare that we are involved with.
Well, Reverend Fauntroy, could you kind of let people know or explain the difference, let's say, between the goal of the civil rights movement, the Civil Rights Act, comparable to today what you're advocating as human right issues? Is there any kind of similarities between the two, or are they totally different types of movements and agendas that's needed?
Well, it's the same people doing the same thing. That's how I put it. Nothing has changed. The people who came to kill, steal, and destroy, those of us who know the Bible, know that that one came to kill, steal, and destroy. The other came to give you life. And I think it's a simple choice of who and where we are with humanity. Um, and for those of us who believe that there are those who are here to spread love and joy throughout the planet, throughout the world, have now must come together and make their voices heard and make their power known. We do have power. We were created, in my opinion, we were created in the image of the creator of the universe, the giver and sustainer of all life is us. We were the first man. We were the first woman. We're the ones who this planet was given to. And we did take very good care of it until we had some invasions. And that's where I believe we stand today, where the invaders have invaded and have taken over our governments and have taken us in another direction. And it's like Dr. King says that a man can't ride your back if you're standing up, you're standing tall. So it's time for us to stand tall, do what we know is right, and stand on that. It's not black versus white, it's wrong versus right. And we need to know the difference, and we need to know that it's all over the planet now. So that's kind of the difference in what the civil rights movement did. I mean, we were denied basic life when these people came. They came and they found us here, living in peace. And with their guns and their bombs and their wickedness, they took and stole the land. Well, it's now time for us to take it back. And I say take it back, it's just like I said, it's a spiritual warfare. We're not going to fight it with guns and bombs. But we have a spiritual power that is much stronger and much more powerful than the gun and the bomb and the poisons that they're putting in our foods and in our air and in our water. So it's time for those of us who are believers to take a real serious stand now.
Well, again, Reverend Fauntroy, it sounds like to me now maybe the bigger difference is between this movements and the Civil Rights Act and the Civil Rights movements is this is clearly a human issue. If you're focusing directly on human beings, this is not so much a race issue comparable to the 50s and the 60s. Let's say when blacks weren't allowed to go certain places, they couldn't sit on the front of the bus, they couldn't go into white-owned establishments. So you're not trying to connect any similarities in those areas towards the human rights issues that you see today. Would it be fair to say you're fighting something for all races of people, no matter what particular race that they are? Or do you kind to still put a race factor in the equation of what you're advocating for towards human rights goals?
Well, first of all, like I said, it's not black versus white, it's wrong versus right. Every brother ain't a brother. Every white man ain't your enemy.
Right.
And we need to understand that this is a spiritual warfare. And we're standing, as Dr. King said it, he said it to us so many times, and it kind of stuck with me, because when I realized after one of our rallies in the church in Virginia, was my first time as a young man seeing people come to church barefoot with coveralls and, just ragged clothes. I couldn't believe what I was seeing because I grew up with the shirts and the tie and the coat. Better come, well, you get out of here if you don't have no shirt and tie on. That's the kind of era I came from. So I said to Dr. King that night, I said, Doc, I don't think our people know who we are. And I don't know why I said it at that time, because I didn't know then what I know now. And we started thinking about that. Dr. King had made some statements and a couple of meetings that I was in with him where young man introduced himself as an accountant and said to Dr. King, this is a economic issue that we have. But I didn't understand it at that age. And I think Dr. King grasped it because that's after that they came up with the Operation Breadbasket, if you can remember, out of Chicago when they started that. So yes, it's a human rights issue, and we cannot allow the enemy of mankind to turn us against one another, the divide and conquer tactic, which they have used over and over again, and are still attempting to use it. But we're getting wise to it, and people are beginning to turn to each other and not on each other. And in that manner, we'll be able to take this planet back to where it should be. Peace and love for one another. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. That's the way we grew up, and that's the way it should be. And that's the way the Creator wants his people to live.
Well, Reverend Fauntroy, I mean, to be perfectly honest and blunt, if you're talking about the United States and you're talking about the history of this country, how it basically was built on slavery, it claimed that the country was stolen from the Indians. I mean, if you look back historically, has the United States ever been a so-called peaceful country where everything was kind of in order? Yes, there's tremendous strides and accomplishments and achievements that the United States has existed. But if you had a country that was operating under slavery for 400 years, another 100 years operating under Jim Crow, and just let's say over the last 50 to 60 years with the accomplishments of the civil rights movements and the Civil Rights Act, has there ever really been a time, I mean, in the United States that you could say this country really didn't have major human rights issues?
Well, if you go back to before they came, we lived in peace.
Mm-hmm.
And as Malcolm said it very clearly, we didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us. In other words, when they came, we were here. I just did an excursion to Tuskegee, Alabama, where I took some high school students who had never heard about Tuskegee or never knew about Tuskegee. But I wanted them to see Tuskegee University. I wanted them to take a look at George Washington Carver and the work that he did, and Booker T. Washington and the work that was done there, and to touch that soil and to stand on that airfield where the Tuskegee Airmen learned to fly. My oldest brother was a Tuskegee Airman, and I had got him to do a Zoom with them last year. They were seniors in high school at that time. So I took the opportunity to introduce them to themselves. When we got there, the historian of Tuskegee introduced us when he introduced himself, and he gave his welcome. He said, when they came, we were here. And so, that resonated with me, of course, right away. But the children did not understand what that meant. So at the end, I asked him, the question and answer period, I asked him, who were the they and who are the we? And he went on to explain it, did it very well. He said, the black people were here when the white people came. Okay, now that's a fact. That's a fact. When these people came with their guns and their wickedness, we were already here, living in peace. Mm-hmm. They took it over with their powerful guns and their weapons and their wickedness. Now in Tuskegee, they're struggling to take down the white racist Ku Klux Klan general whose statue is in this town square. And I asked him the question at that point, what's taking y'all so long to get it down? And he said that the state of Alabama, fines them and charges them every time they try to take it down. So then I asked the question, who were the people that were here when they came? And he said it was the Choctaw Indian. I said, oh, okay. Well, who was the chief of that tribe? And he said, Chief Osceola. So I said, okay, well, now you've got whose statue should be up there. That's the statue should be there because those are your people. They looked like you. These people who came with weapons and force to take the land. And that's the truth for this continent. They came with force and weaponry and took the land, and then they called it the United States of America. Mm-hmm. Okay, but there was a land here before they came. There were tribes all over this land before they came who had been murdered and taken and robbed of their land and their natural resource. So that's the human position that we need to come from now. Before Dr. King was assassinated, he asked my brother to go to Africa and to bring the African presidents or leaders together so that they could stop the Europeans from coming and taking their natural resources. They were killing the leaders, taking over the country with their money, and taking the natural resources out. So we've got the same issue, same problem that has always been: evil against good and right against wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And it's time for us to look at it like that. During that civil rights movement, there were many white folk who were just people, who believed in the Holy Spirit, who took a stand along with us. Dr. King was the leader because he came from our side of the issue. There were no other leaders in any race that took the stand that Dr. King took. And then when they saw that Malcolm X and that Dr. King were coming together, and the power that that represented for the people of this country and for the world, because Malcolm was an international figure, just as Dr. King was at that time. So it's clear to me that it is a human rights issue and that we must turn to each other, or we're going to lose this whole continent to these wicked folk who've come from wherever they come from with their ideas of taking over, ruling, and having it their way, taking everything for themselves, while the people suffer, while the people are homeless and without work, without a way to make a living, because we're being controlled and undermined for our natural resource.
Well, one thing, you mentioned about the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and you worked with him, at least in the Washington, D.C. area. Towards the end of his life, the last 2 years in particular, 67 to 68, he had changed his whole agenda from civil rights, towards the civil rights movements, towards the economic avocation of changing the whole economic structure, planning a Poor People's March, fighting for the sanitation workers in 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee, and making statements that it was not enough just to be able to go into, for black people in particular, to go into a white-owned establishment, but it would be time to be able to have good jobs in the establishment, be able to own hotels, be able to own businesses, and really change the whole economic outlook and direction that the United States were looking to go into, or should have been going into. Saying that all to say, was there a tremendous void after Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated towards, let's say, the economic shift of equality for pretty much all people and changing the whole economic, I don't want to say opportunities, because this country has tremendous opportunities, but let's just say change the whole economic structure of how this country operates on an economic level?
Well, yes. After they assassinated Dr. King, it destroyed the movement at that point. Some of the leaders or some of the participants in the movement took jobs. Some took federal jobs and jobs in government, and just forgot about the movement, took care of themselves. That's okay. But we still had a struggle, because it was the black people who were the last hired and the first fired, as it was stated. It was the black people who were on the streets without work. It was the black people who were miseducated, lied to in our public school system, because if they knew the truth about themselves, and if we taught them our truth, there would be a different world today. And that's what Dr. King was aiming to do, to educate our people, to create our own economic base, to have our own stores in our own communities, which were all mostly destroyed with the so-called integration that the system came up with. Let's integrate them, and we can control. So that's what it is, and that's the way it worked. That's the way it turned out, because we thought that integration was going to make it better. It didn't. It made it worse. It made it worse for our people. It made it better for them because they made more money. And so who would come against making more money for themselves? And but it's our task now to bring our people back together. It's our task now to organize our people, all people who are interested in freedom and justice and peace. And there are people all over the world. You're seeing demonstrations all over the world, but we're not doing it here like we used to, but they're doing it in other countries because it's the same issue, same thing going on there that has gone on here at the hands of the same people. Mm-hmm. So once Dr. King took that stand after the dealing with the Vietnam War and after taking a stand for economics, I guess the powers that be decided that they had to get rid of him and Malcolm, which they did. And we have to understand today that that's what happened. And that's who did it. It's the same people doing the same thing they've always done. Nothing has changed.
Okay, well, up until this point, I mean, you've been very selective, and this is the hard-hitting type of show. So when you say they, I mean, that could be a broad statement. It could be the United States government. It could be the system. It could be a certain level, a clique of people. So it's very important that people clarify they as exactly the definition of they. Another thing, when you're talking about the late 60s and you say that, and you had agreed that was a big void and a big missed opportunity where the vision and the planning that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had, the change of his movement moving towards, it seems like to me some people would say, and I'm just trying to play devil's apple, okay, you say integration was the worst thing that could happen. What integration, certain people, black people and other ethnic minorities could now, let's say, go into establishments, do things that they weren't able to do. You're down in Miami. I mean, black people were at one point weren't allowed to go to Miami Beach. They weren't allowed to go to Coral Gables, Florida. They are now able, at least legally, to go to these establishments. They can go into these hotels as long as they can pay for it. So would that be one sense of a good thing about integration, or is there still a lot more to it than just that?
Well, first of all, integration was just another trick, another way to maintain their false superiority. Mm. Another way for them to maintain their control of the people. Economically, if they could control education, they miseducated, they never told the truth, they lied to us in our school system, still doing it. And that's what I did with Tuskegee. I showed these children just what it was all about. And we need to show our children. We need to teach our truth to our children. We need to teach our story. What we're learning, what they are learning, what our children are learning is his story, what he's telling us about our people. So I'm saying it's on us to teach the truth to our people, about our people. Now, others do that. They have their own schools, and I speak of the Jewish community. They have their own schools. They have their own communities, and they have their own economic base. We should and could do the same thing, and only if we would. The continent of Africa is the richest continent on the planet. And so is the United States, the continent that America is on. And that land was our land when they came. Those are the truths that need to be told to these young people so that they will understand we're not slaves, we were enslaved, okay? We're not criminals, we were criminalized by a wicked system that used their laws to incarcerate our people. Those laws that they live by are not the laws of God. The laws of do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Love your neighbor as yourself. Those laws don't exist in their system. Mm-hmm. They want to own everything, control everything, and rule everybody. It does not work like that anymore. And the people are coming together and saying enough is enough. They're standing together all over the planet. is standing against evil and wickedness will not run this planet. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. And we're going to insist on making that well known to the world. As you will see in other countries, they've had enough of these people coming into their countries, taking their stuff, killing their people, and taking over their lands. Now, here in Miami, for an example, when I came here in 1978, black folk were 80% of the population. Today, in 2024, they're around 12%, 10%. Well, how did that happen? What happened that you have 80% of the population whittled down to 10 to 12%, if it's that much at this point? Well, what happened was there was an invasion. In May of 1980, 175,000 people were brought to this country from other countries. You may know it as Cuba, that they brought 175,000. They called it the Mariel boat lift. What they didn't tell you was each of those people got X amount of dollars from our government to establish their businesses, to take over this land, and they did. And the government is responsible for doing that. And those who were in control of the government, the elected officials who were in control of the government, are the ones who made those arrangements. Now, you can put all of that together if you know who they were, because it's not hard to do. But my point to our people is this: change does not come from the top down, Mr. President. Change comes from the bottom up, my people. So if the people will just organize themselves, put their heads together, put their finances together, and build what we're supposed to have, and take back this land that is ours from these invaders, and not be afraid. We cannot have fear. As long as we've got fear, they're going to win. We have no fear, and we must take a stand. Yes, they've murdered a lot of our people who stood up for what's just and what's right. Okay, and I'm sure they will continue to do that. But if we continue to shine the light on this wickedness, the light will overcome the dark.
Reverend Fauntroy, you had made one statement that kind of caught my attention. You said when you came to Miami, the black population in 1978 was about 80%, and you said it dropped down to 12%. Where did they go? I mean, where did black people? I mean, what was the whole pattern of how the population numbers? If that number is accurate, I mean, I will do some research. I'll take your word for it, but that's a tremendous drop to go from 80%
yes,
to 12%.
Do the research.
Mm-hmm.
Do the research, because it's happening all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
It's happening in every city right now. It's happening in Chicago. It's happening in Los Angeles. It's happening in Philadelphia. It has already happened in Washington, D.C. So it has happened. It's right in your face if you see it. I mean, if you know that that's what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
How is the complexion changing in this city? How is one group of people owning everything? What is that? Okay, so it's on us to if we're researchers, research that.
Yes.
And put a plan together to change it. Now, we have the plan. We got a plan, but we don't have the people to support the plan at this point. They're coming because we got to do something. We can't sit back and just get eliminated from the planet. And that's what's happening in our cities. Where are these people? Where are the 80%? Okay, the young men have been locked up, been put on drugs. Drugs have come from everywhere. In Miami, for an example, I can say this. We didn't grow the drugs, and we certainly didn't bring them in, and we certainly didn't make the money off the drugs. But most of the young people were being killed, and were dying off of these drugs. Mm-hmm. Now, who makes the drugs? Who grows the drugs? And who brings them in? It's certainly not the little boy out there on the bicycle that they're blaming for all of this. You know, so it's on us to think. We got to start thinking and using our head, our God-given thought pattern, you know, and we can do something about this. You know, and I think the church plays a big part in that they must organize and teach their people. We need to know more about today and less about 2,000 years ago. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, the key
save these children from this craziness that's going on.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the key thing you just mentioned was today. I mean, we could definitely learn from historical histories in the past, but clearly today, what is the game plan today moving forward? And if this is a human rights issue that is the main focal point, that, you know, consists of many different components of life, from spiritually, educationally wise, health wise, economically wise, politically wise. I mean, you could put so many components into this one structure when you're talking about a human condition and a human need. Is there any examples of any types of coalitions that you know about that really has, let's say, a tremendous movement moving in this area that you can kind of let people know about?
Yes. Well, there have been and there are. Um, I will point specifically to the Congressional Black Caucus when it was founded in 1972. They had a plan of action that would definitely have lifted our people, the Black Caucus representing Black people in America. And that effort was sabotaged, of course. Um, I was there when my brother founded, Walter Fauntroy founded the Congressional Black Caucus. They will tell you something else, but the fact of the matter was he was the one that initiated and founded the Congressional Black Caucus, and that those men who were part of the original Black Caucus had a plan. They put a plan together that was working. That plan was sabotaged, and they used the divide and conquer tactic, and they divided the group politically and caused the division that led to the demise of the plan. Well, the plan is still here. It will work if we work it, but we've got to begin to understand that if we're going to free ourselves from this, we got to pay for it. We got to put our own money up to pay for our own freedom. Freedom, like they say, ain't free. It is not. If it were free, we would have been free a long time ago. But we're not free. We're still under the auspices of a wicked group of people who control our government. And it is our government. If you go back into our history, they came and changed it to their United States of America Incorporated government. It's not run by the people or for the people, but our government was by the people and for the people, not by the rich and for the rich. And that's what we've gotten today. The rich run this country, and everything goes to follow the money. You're going to find the problem. Yes, and it's time to do that. Their time is up. But we got to stand up. If we don't stand up and be counted, we've wasted time, and we can no longer waste any time. So prayer is the answer. Coming together, turning to each other, not on each other, are the answers to our freedom and future for our children. All of these all this wickedness that's going on, and the other thing that I did not share with you, I guess I should. Dick Gregory and I were very, very close friends all those years. So I learned a lot through his teaching. And Dr. Alvenia Fulton, I don't know if you know her, she's out of Chicago. Reverend Dr. Alvenia Fulton, who taught us about food. And between her and Dick Gregory and Dr. King, those were my instructors. And I'm just so grateful that I was able to learn from them. And now I'm trying to share that information so that some of you younger people can pick it up and teach it and show these young people that it's on us, and it is us, that we must turn to each other, and that we must work together, and not excluding anybody else and not coming against anybody else, but at least being for yourself and for your community. We should have the same thing that everybody else in this country has, and it's not happening. Mm-hmm. These people are getting off of boats, getting $10,000 a month right now from our government, through our leaders, through people who they say we elected to office. So I'm saying to us, we need to look at that, and we need to do something about it.
I really can't say too much more about that. You hit it right on you hit the nail right on the head with that last statement. And I think one thing you made mention that I think is also relevant and very important is that when you pay for something, you're going to look at it differently. If you're getting anybody that's going to finance a particular movement and it has to come out of their own pocket, that shows me that people are serious, because I think it's just a proven fact that when people pay for something in life, they value it a lot differently than when it's paid for through some other source. And I think if this is going to be a political opportunity, maybe the upcoming presidential election, some of these issues that you just mentioned about human rights should be put on as a political campaign, a political strategy, a political policy. Are you kind of optimistic about the upcoming presidential election as an opportunity to put these human rights conditions on the line politically?
I would love to be, but I've seen too many times where, like I said, we registered people to vote throughout the south of this country and throughout this entire country. We changed the complexion, but we did not change the condition. We voted on both sides of these issues, and we had even been told if it had not been for our vote, they would not have been in office, so they say.
Mm-hmm.
But I have not seen the change that we're looking for. I still see our young people filling the jails up. I see our young people, I see our elderly people dying in hospitals. I see people getting sick of this bad food, and they keep coming every other day with a new poison in the food that we have to recall this food because there's something wrong with it. Well, come on. Who's overseeing that? Food and Drug Administration. Who's over the Food and Drug Administration? That's what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. We need to begin to investigate and write about what we're finding, because you'll find it's the same people doing the same thing. And if that doesn't change, what difference does it make who you vote for?
Mm-hmm.
What difference does it make if you're getting the same result every time? And I think when we look into our history, and I'm going to share some of that with you at some point, that we will learn that this is not our way. These are not our people. If we're going to survive, we need to do something about this condition that we're in right now. So I would pray that things would change. I have very little confidence in the system that we've been under for those very reasons, that we've worked very hard. I mean, I've watched my friends go to jail for just trying to register somebody to vote. I've watched others being murdered, whites and blacks who stood up together. We know the stories, and there are many whites now who are with us on these issues. And what we have to say, we're not allowing the divisions anymore. You're not going to come in and divide us to conquer us anymore. And I think Mr. George Bush said that clearly when he was president. Young Bush said that we're going to go in there and divide and conquer. That's what he said. And it's exactly what's going on. And Senior Bush said, when he was in the White House, he said, if the American people knew what we were doing, they would hang all of us. Mm. Now that's a bona fide statement. You can look it up and find it. Okay? They said that. So we got to understand what that means and who's saying it and why. And then know the power that we have as God's people.
Mm. I always like to try to find a way to end the program on a good note. And as we're pretty much running out of time on this particular segment, I think one thing I do want to add towards what you said, and I don't think you're trying to discourage people from the political system, particularly towards a presidential election and making sure we have the right commander in chief, we have the right Congress intact. But maybe you're just like many other people, just not that optimistic towards this particular political structure being able to resolve the human need or what you're advocating for, the way things are operating now. I think the United States government and the United States Congress has the ability to make a tremendous difference. Whether they have the right will and intentions is a whole nother story. And, pretty much I always like to ask the guests as we're ending this particular segment, if there's any last words that they would like to leave for people or anything that you would like to say, feel free to express yourself.
Well, let me also say that, yes, we're still working on the changes. We started an organization called the People's Grassroots Assembly. The People's Grassroots Assembly is an organization of people who understand that change does not come from the top down. It comes from the bottom up, and that we have got to organize the people at the bottom and have our wishes known and put together our agenda. So that's what we're trying. That's what we are doing. To put an agenda together that's going to satisfy the people of this country, those who at least locked out and left out. We got to come together and know that this is a country that has rules for everybody, and that we need to demand that those who are in position, who have been selected and elected to office, must follow the rules of the people. And until we establish that, they're going to continue to do what is being done. All of the riches go to the one group of people, and the wealth goes to one group of people, and the others suffer. And more of us now than more us than are them. And it's time for us to do this. So I would hope that people would look us up, People's Grassroots Assembly, and begin to support our cause. Not trying to put anybody else's cause down or any other group down. We just know that this is something that we see needs to be done, and we're trying our best to get it done to help our people.
That last statement and those words are well taken. I mean, understand underneath the circumstances, I couldn't have asked for a better guest and topic. This show really wasn't planned up until yesterday, and certainly God makes a way when a good intention or a good need is needed. I'd like to also thank the owner of AccessTV.org network on the air for giving me the opportunity to provide this media message. Usually I would say things like this off the air, but sometimes you need to give thanks and do on the air as well. And definitely thank you, Reverend Fauntroy, for what you are willing to do being a guest on this particular show. And just I'm going to learn something. Hopefully people will learn something and we can all get involved. I have your contact information, and I definitely want to work with you towards your particular movement in any capacity that I know how or capable of doing, because I think it's the right thing more than anything else. And definitely keep up the good work. And it was a pleasure and an honor having you as a special guest this morning on the Face to Face Talk Show.
Well, thank you so much, Jonathan, and you keep up the good work, my brother. God bless you.
Okay. Thank you as well. You're welcome. Okay, this is Jonathan Small. Just enjoyed hosting this edition of Face to Face with the special guests, human rights activist, the Reverend Raymond Fauntroy, and it was a tremendous honor, as I just mentioned, and a pleasure having him as a special guest on this particular show. Definitely currently working on getting a guest ready for next week. Just got to finalize some things and find the right particular topic. But again, this is a great network. I really appreciate the opportunity, again, that AccessTV.org network, the owner, has given me to go along with his wife. And definitely this is a great network to keep abreast towards many different informational segments throughout the week. Until I see you again, for people out there, have a very blessed day and keep the faith. Thank you.